There are places in this world that don't feel real, not because they are perfect, but because they make you forget, even for a moment, that the rest of the world exists. Switzerland is one of those places. Villages that look like they were borrowed from a fantasy storybook. Lakes that glow in colors no camera can fully capture. Mountains so close they feel like they were placed there just for you. But Switzerland was never designed to impress. It simply exists, quietly, completely, as if it has always known something the rest of the world is still trying to figure out. The deeper you go, the more it pulls you in, past the famous postcards, past the tourist trails, into valleys where waterfalls pour from cliffs like curtains of silver, into mountain villages where life still moves slowly, and the only sound is the wind and distant cowbells, into a country that feels less like a destination and more like an escape. This is Switzerland, possibly the most perfect country on Earth. The best way to begin a journey through Switzerland is not in a city, it's in a valley where the world seems to have been arranged just for you. Welcome to Lauterbrunnen. The moment you arrive, everything changes. Not because of what you see, but because of what you feel. The noise of ordinary life disappears. Wooden chalets sit beneath cliffs so tall they seem impossible. Colorful flowers fill every balcony. And from somewhere above, always above, the sound of falling water finds you before you ever find the source. Then you look up and you understand. Waterfalls pour from the cliff tops, cascading through open air before disappearing into the valley below. So many of them, so constant, that the valley seems to be breathing, exhaling mist, movement, and a silence that somehow feels louder than anything you left behind. It doesn't feel real. It feels like you've stepped inside a fairy tale. Early in the morning, the valley is at its most magical. Soft sunlight slowly reaches the mountain peaks, while the village is still waking up. Cowbells echo across the green meadows. The river flows quietly through the valley floor, and the cool mist from the cliff tops settles on your skin like something you didn't know you were missing. Life moves slowly here, and that may be its greatest gift, because the people who live in this valley didn't slow down for visitors. They simply never let the world rush them in the first place. For generations, local families have lived by the same simple rhythm: raising cattle, making cheese, caring for their homes, and living with the mountains rather than trying to change them. That's the true beauty of Lauterbrunnen. It isn't trying to impress anyone. It simply exists, just as it always has. Surrounding the valley are three legendary Alpine peaks, the Eiger, Monch, and Jungfrau, standing above like silent guardians. Their snow-covered summits remind you how small you really are. Yet somehow, the valley below feels warm, welcoming, and full of life. It's easy to understand why this place captured so many hearts. The Switzerland the world imagines, the wooden chalets, flower-filled balconies, green meadows, and towering mountains was inspired by valleys just like this. But as breathtaking as Lauterbrunnen is, the real surprise is still waiting above it. High above these waterfalls are tiny mountain villages with no roads leading in or out. Reached only by cable car or mountain train, they have spent generations living among the clouds. And that's where our journey goes next. Leaving Lauterbrunnen doesn't feel like climbing a mountain. It feels like leaving one world and quietly entering another. As the cable car rises above the valley, the waterfalls become thin white ribbons against the cliffs. The river disappears into the distance. The sound of the village slowly fades beneath the wind. Then, high above the clouds, the mountain reveals its first secret, perched on the very edge of the cliff. Murren. There are no roads leading here. There never needed to be. People arrive by cable car or mountain train, stepping into a village that seems suspended between earth and sky. Across the valley, the Eiger, Monch and Jungfrau stand so close it feels as though you could almost reach out and touch them. Arriving here doesn't feel like reaching a destination. It feels like being invited into a world few places still remember. And then something unexpected happens. You stop listening to noise, because there isn't any. Only the wind moving through the pine trees, the distant songs of cowbells drifting across the Alpine meadows, and the quiet footsteps of people who have never needed the modern world to be loud. Walk beyond the last chalet, and the mountain grows even quieter. The path follows the hillside until the landscape begins arranging homes wherever the land allows, mixing family houses with old barns and livestock shelters that have shared these slopes for centuries. This is where Gimmelwald quietly appears, not because someone planned it, but because the mountain allowed it. Life here has always followed nature's calendar. Snow decides when winter begins. The summer meadows decide when cattle climb the slopes. The mountain has always made the rules, and the people simply learn to live beside them. Across the valley, another story begins with the gentle click of steel against steel. A cogwheel railway slowly climbs through forests and open meadows before reaching a broad natural ledge where another Alpine village has been waiting for generations. Wengen greets you not with traffic, but with church bells. What began as a small farming community still carries the same peaceful spirit today. Many of its beautiful wooden buildings remain exactly where they were first built, while the railway continues to bring visitors the same way it always has. Slowly, quietly, without rushing anyone. Just beyond the next valley, the mountains change once again. The forests grow deeper, the cliffs rise higher, and one immense wall of rock begins to dominate the entire landscape. Grindelwald sits beneath one of the most famous mountain faces in the world, a north face so severe that for decades no one could reach its summit. Yet the village never let that shadow define it. Dark timber chalets, emerald pastures, dense forests, and towering peaks still shape everyday life exactly as they always have. Then, almost without warning, the mountains step back. The water takes its place. Fed by glaciers high above, Lake Brienz glows with a turquoise color so vivid it hardly seems possible. On a small peninsula that gently stretches into its crystal-clear water sits Iseltwald, a village that first grew from fishing and farming, long before travelers ever discovered its beauty. Here, the reflections are so perfect that the mountains, the chalets, and the lake seem to become one. What makes Murren, Gimmelwald, Wengen, Grindelwald, and Iseltwald so unforgettable isn't their beauty. Switzerland is filled with beautiful places. It's that these are not villages frozen in time for visitors. They are living communities. Children still walk these paths. Farmers still climb the summer pastures. Church bells still mark the passing of each day. Life continues here because people never stopped believing these mountains could be home. The Alpine dream isn't something Switzerland created for the world. It simply invited the world to witness it. But every peaceful village above the clouds hides an extraordinary truth. None of this should have been easy. The trains, the tunnels, The bridges, the cable cars, everything that makes these mountains feel effortless was built through some of the greatest human effort ever attempted in the Alps. And that story begins next. The higher you travel into the Alps, the more one question begins to follow you. How did anyone build any of this? The mountains don't become smaller, the valleys don't become easier. Yet somehow, the railway keeps moving forward. Then, around a quiet bend in the forest, you see something that almost stops time itself. A graceful stone bridge stretches across a deep canyon, and then disappears straight into the side of a mountain. Not beside the mountain, inside it. This is the Landwasser Viaduct, and the first time you see it, your brain takes a moment to accept that it's real. Its elegant stone arches carry the railway nearly to the height of a 20-story building above the river, before delivering the train directly into a tunnel carved through solid rock. And it was built without the machines we take for granted today. Only local stone, careful hands, and a stubbornness to get it right. More than a century later, trains still cross it every single day. Not because it was overbuilt, because it was built right. That idea follows you deeper into the Alps. The railway begins climbing once again, leaving forests behind as snow slowly replaces grass. At Kleine Scheidegg, the journey changes. The train disappears into the Eiger itself. It climbs through the heart of the mountain, deeper, higher, until the darkness outside the window gives way to something that stops every conversation in the carriage. A station carved into the rock. The air is thin. The sky outside is a shade of blue that has no name at lower altitudes, and the world you came from has completely disappeared. The people who built this believed it was possible before they had any proof. They drilled through solid rock in the dark, in the cold, while most of the world was certain they would fail. Stand on the viewing platform above the station, and you understand exactly why they refused to stop. The mountains still aren't finished. From the village of Zermatt, another railway begins its steady climb toward one of Switzerland's greatest viewpoints, a landscape so vast that the eye doesn't know where to settle first. Mountains in every direction, glaciers stretching toward the horizon, and a stillness so complete it feels like the world is holding its breath. Switzerland never asked nature to become easier. It simply built smarter. That same thinking appears across the country. Mountain roads that curl through passes traders first crossed on foot centuries ago. Historic routes were once carved out on Napoleon's orders, because even wars need roads through the Alps. Steel cables and hanging bridges bolted into cliff faces, turning once impossible crossings into something any person can attempt. Most countries built roads around their mountains. Switzerland built railways through them. It built bridges across them. It built life inside them. That's why these landscapes feel so effortless today. Not because nature became easier, but because generations of people learned to work with it instead of against it. And while the bridges and railways tell one part of that story, the mountains have been quietly creating another masterpiece for thousands of years. One made not from stone or steel, but from water. Just when it seems Switzerland has reached the limits of what can be built, it quietly proves there are no limits at all. High above the valleys, surrounded by snow-covered peaks, another remarkable experience waits where the sky almost feels close enough to touch. At Glacier 3000, two mountain summits are connected by something that shouldn't be possible. Not a road, not a tunnel, a bridge hanging in the open air. The Peak Walk is the world's first suspension bridge linking two mountain peaks. It holds steady through fierce alpine winds, heavy snowfall, and freezing temperatures, allowing visitors to walk from one summit to another with nothing but the mountains stretching in every direction. The view is unforgettable, but the bridge tells an even greater story. In Switzerland, the mountain is never seen as an obstacle. It is part of the design. Hidden among rugged cliffs and wide alpine meadows, a quiet lake sits held in place by a great dam, surrounded by summer pastures where local herders have guided their cattle for centuries. Old traditions, modern engineering, living side by side, as if they were never meant to be separate. Farther into the Alps, another giant rises from the valley, a wall of concrete so immense it dwarfs everything around it. Yet somehow the waterfalls spilling down the surrounding cliffs make it feel less like something built against nature and more like something that belongs within it. Beauty and purpose exist together here. They always have. Perhaps the most unforgettable reminder of that truth isn't a dam at all. High above the valley near Randa, a suspension bridge stretches nearly half a kilometer across open space, the longest of its kind in the Swiss Alps. Every step reminds you just how small a person becomes among these mountains. And then, the journey returns to where all of this truly begins. Hidden beneath the great peaks of the Bernese Alps, waterfalls thunder through solid rock, carrying glacial meltwater that has carved its own path through the mountain over thousands of years. Invisible from the outside, invisible from above. A world the mountain built entirely for itself. A powerful reminder that nature has always been Switzerland's greatest engineer. Perhaps that's Switzerland's greatest lesson. It never tried to defeat the mountains. It learned to build with them. Every bridge, every dam, every mountain pass, every railway, all created by a small, landlocked country that looked at its greatest challenge and turned it into its greatest strength. But the mountains have one final gift. The same glaciers that power rivers, carve valleys, and feed waterfalls also create something so beautiful it almost feels impossible. Lakes so clear, so brilliantly blue, that they hardly seem real. And that's where our journey goes next. After crossing the high bridges and mountain passes, Switzerland begins to slow down. The cliffs become quieter, the wind grows softer, and suddenly, the mountains start holding water instead of snow. Hidden deep within the Bernese Alps, surrounded by towering cliffs, lies a lake that almost everyone believes has been edited the first time they see it, Ocean Lake. Reaching it is part of the experience. A gondola climbs above the valley, followed by a short walk through alpine meadows until the trees finally open and the lake appears. The color hardly seems possible. Not bright blue, not green. Something in between. Something that has no good name. A glowing shade that light creates when it passes through water. This clear light is filtered through ancient layers of limestone and rock until it becomes something cameras will spend the rest of the day trying to get right and never quite manage. Just when you think you've seen Switzerland's most beautiful lake, the mountains quietly reveal another. Hidden beneath thick forests is Blausee, small, still, so clear the bottom looks close enough to touch, and yet the water is far deeper than it appears, Fed by pure underground Alpine springs, the lake feels less like a place you visit and more like a secret the forest has carefully protected for a very long time. But Switzerland's water keeps changing its character. In the canton of Graubünden, surrounded by tall pine forests, rests a lake whose very name means the lake of rest. Cormacy. Its calm turquoise water surrounds a tiny island that visitors can reach by swimming or rowing across on a quiet summer afternoon. It is one of those rare places that feels exactly as peaceful as its name promises. Follow the mountains higher, and another lake has been quietly inspiring visitors for generations. Resting high above the upper Engadine Valley, Lake Sills reflects snow-covered peaks and endless blue skies in water so still it becomes a mirror. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche returned to its shores summer after summer, sitting with these views while he searched for ideas that felt large enough to matter. Perhaps even great thoughts need beautiful places to begin. And Switzerland has many. Near the village of Lungern, another lake glows with the same blue-green light. The color is impossible to explain to someone who hasn't seen it. Some things the eye understands before the mind can catch up. Then, the journey reaches a place where history quietly floats on the water. At the center of an artificial lake created by a dam, a small island rises from the surface. Ancient ruins standing above the waterline, reminding you that in Switzerland, history and nature often share the same view. But perhaps the country's greatest water secret is hidden high in the Alps, far from roads and famous viewpoints. A small mountain lake called Lake Lunghin. It doesn't stand out because of its size. It stands out because of where its water goes. From this single point, rain falling in 3 different directions begins 3 completely different journeys. One toward the North Sea, one toward the Adriatic, one toward the Black Sea. One quiet lake, 3 seas. A reminder that in Switzerland, even a single drop of water can shape an entire continent. But lakes tell only half the story. Once the water begins to move, it carves deep gorges, races through crystal-clear valleys, and creates rivers so beautiful they hardly seem real. And that's where our journey flows next. The lakes may steal the first glance, but Switzerland's rivers tell the deeper story. As glacier water leaves the mountains, it gathers speed, carving valleys, shaping cliffs, turning solid rock into something that takes thousands of years to complete, but makes you stop and stare in about 3 seconds. One river, more than any other, captures that feeling. In the Italian-speaking south of Switzerland, the Verzasca flows through a narrow valley where the water is so clear that it almost disappears. Standing on the ancient stone bridge in the village of Lavatezzo, you look down, and the riverbed seems close enough to step onto. It isn't. Those pools are far deeper than they look. The river has been carving this valley for a very long time, and it isn't finished. The bridge has watched over this place for centuries. Partly destroyed by a flood long ago and carefully rebuilt, it still stands, while nearby, a small church continues to overlook a river that many Swiss people simply call the most beautiful in their country. But peaceful rivers eventually find their voice, and when they do, the sound reaches you long before the water comes into view. Ahead, a deep roar rises through the trees until the landscape suddenly opens. Rhine Falls, the most powerful waterfall in Central Europe. There are no numbers that prepare you for it, no description that quite fits. It is simply something you stand in front of and feel beneath your feet. while the mist settles on your face and the sound fills every part of you. Boats carry visitors to a great rock standing in the middle of the falls, where the power of the river is no longer something you watch. It's something your body registers without being asked. Yet Switzerland's water keeps surprising you in new ways. Near Meiringen, a river disappears into a narrow passage carved over thousands of years through solid limestone. Inside the Aar Gorge, towering walls rise above your head while cool air fills the narrow canyon, even on the hottest summer days. Shafts of light break through the opening above, touching water that never stops moving, never stops shaping the mountain around it. The river is still building this place. It simply works on a different clock. Then the mountains become gentler once again. Waterfalls tumble through the forest before reaching the turquoise waters of Lake Brienz, the Giesbach Falls, where for well over a century, visitors have ridden a historic funicular alongside the rushing water to a hotel perched above the cascade, just as travelers from across Europe once came here for the same reason. Some things are worth repeating across generations, but some of Switzerland's greatest treasures remain wonderfully hidden. Deep inside a valley few visitors ever find, a waterfall plunges from towering cliffs, sending mist high into the mountain air. The valley is as wild and untouched as ever, and that perhaps is its greatest gift. Farther east, another landscape surprises even those who think they know Switzerland. The Ruinota, sometimes called the Swiss Grand Canyon, was born after a massive Alpine landslide when a river spent countless centuries carving its way through the fallen rock. The canyon it created looks like it belongs somewhere much further from civilization. And along the border with France, a waterfall reminds you that rivers pay little attention to human borders. Its water has flowed between two nations for centuries, following only the path that nature chose. Perhaps that's what makes Swiss water so unforgettable. It can rest quietly in a mountain lake. It can roar through a canyon, or plunge from a cliff with a force that rearranges something inside you. But it never feels hurried. It moves with the quiet confidence of something that has been shaping these mountains for thousands of years and will continue long after we are gone. Yet all of this water begins somewhere even older, somewhere colder, frozen high above the valleys, where the story of Switzerland itself truly begins. The glaciers are waiting. The higher you climb into Switzerland, the quieter the world becomes. The rivers disappear beneath the snow. The waterfalls grow silent. And one question begins to follow you through that silence. How do people survive in a place shaped entirely by ice? At last, you arrive at the source of almost every drop of Swiss water. Stretching across the heart of the Valais Alps, the Aletsch Glacier is unlike anything else in Europe, the largest glacier in the Alps, a frozen river of ice so immense it seems impossible, flowing for kilometer after kilometer from the great peaks of the Jungfrau, Mönch and Eiger toward the valley far below. At first, it seems completely still, but it isn't. Every year, this glacier slowly moves forward. The motion is too slow for the human eye to notice. Yet it has been quietly carving this landscape for thousands of years, and it hasn't stopped. Summer reveals another hidden world. As the surface begins to melt, clear streams race across the ancient ice before disappearing into deep vertical shafts, plunging into the frozen world below. A reminder that even solid ice is always changing from within. But nowhere is that change more visible than at the Rhone Glacier. Near the Furka Pass, where the great Rhone River begins its long journey toward the sea. workers return every summer with an unusual task. They cover parts of the glacier with giant white blankets, not to hide it, to save it. The blankets reflect the summer sunlight, slowing the melt of the ancient ice. Yet every autumn, when they are removed, the glacier has still pulled back a little farther than the year before. Nearby, a historic hotel has welcomed visitors for well over a century. In the early photographs, a great wall of ice stands just beside the building. In the photographs taken today, that wall is gone. Farther east, another glacier carries a story that feels almost as old as the ice itself. As its meltwater begins, the long journey toward distant seas, the glacier slowly pulls away from the valley it once completely filled, retreating the way something retreats when it has decided it can no longer stay. The frozen world still holds secrets beyond the surface. At the foot of one glacier, meltwater carves glowing caves beneath the ice, blue walls, crystal ceilings, and a silence so complete it feels sacred. One of the most extraordinary places nature can build without a single human hand. Between the glaciers, the mountains open into something unexpected. The Grimsel Pass, used by traders since Roman times, weaves between ancient granite peaks and glacier blue lakes. The landscape here feels like the very edge of the living world, where ice, rock, and water exist together in a silence that becomes its own kind of sound. And yet for centuries, people crossed these heights. Because the Alps were never only a barrier, they were always also a road. Yet the greatest story these glaciers tell is written across time itself. The evidence of what is being lost is impossible to ignore. Near one glacier, a suspension bridge now stretches high above a glacial lake that didn't even exist a few decades ago. As the ice pulled away, the lake appeared, and the bridge was built to cross a gap that the glacier itself once filled. These glaciers are the oldest landscapes in Switzerland. Some of the ice beneath your feet first fell as snow nearly 2,000 years ago, when Rome still ruled much of Europe. For thousands of years, the frozen world shaped Switzerland. Now, for the first time in history, Switzerland is witnessing the frozen world slowly disappear. The question is no longer how people learned to live with the ice. It's how long the ice can continue living with us. And as we leave these silent glaciers behind, our journey descends into valleys where time has protected something else just as remarkable. Not frozen rivers, but medieval towns that have stood almost unchanged for centuries. The glaciers may shape Switzerland, but it's the people who learned how to live beside them. Nowhere is that more evident than at the mountain pass where the human world meets the frozen Alps, a crossing that has welcomed climbers and travelers for over a century, all of them standing beneath a north face so severe it defeated every attempt to reach its summit for decades. When a team finally succeeded, a 4-day ascent through ice, storm, and near impossible terrain, it became one of the greatest stories in Alpine history. Not every mountain asks you to climb it. Some simply ask you to admire it. From Fronalpstock, high above Lake Lucerne, 100 alpine peaks fill the horizon on a clear day. Glaciers, forests, lakes, and valleys come together in one breathtaking panorama, a view that feels like Switzerland in a single glance. Farther east, Arosa reminds visitors that these mountains once healed as much as they inspired. People came here from across Europe not for the skiing and the trails, but for the air itself, for the quiet, for the feeling that something inside them might finally be allowed to rest. Some still come for the same reason. Winter brings another rhythm to these mountains, the sound of edges carving fresh snow, the rush of open descents, the particular freedom that only comes from moving fast through a very old landscape. And at nearly 2,000 meters above sea level, mountain villages prove that Swiss communities were built to thrive where most others could never have survived. And finally comes Chandelin, one of Europe's highest permanently inhabited villages, a place that, after a lifetime of traveling the world, one writer chose as her favorite place to simply be. Perhaps that's the true answer to the question the mountains asked. How do people survive in a place shaped by ice? They don't simply survive it. They learn to call it home. And as our journey leaves the frozen peaks behind, another timeless Switzerland begins to appear. One of medieval streets, castle walls, and clock towers that have watched over these valleys for centuries. Leaving the mountains behind, Switzerland reveals another masterpiece, not carved by glaciers, but over centuries. The first stop is Bern, the nation's capital, where the Ahr River wraps around the old city like a protective ribbon. Legend says the city was named after a bear. History remembers it as the place where Albert Einstein, working a quiet desk job at the local patent office, sat down and changed our understanding of time itself. At the heart of the old town stands a medieval clock tower whose mechanical figures have performed the same hourly show for centuries, quietly marking time as generations have come and gone. Follow the river south, and another timeless city appears, Lucerne. Its medieval streets, church towers, and riverside squares lead to a covered wooden bridge so old that the concept of a covered wooden bridge was still new when it was built. It still welcomes people every day, proof that the finest architecture never truly grows old. Farther north, Stein am Rhein feels almost too perfect to be real. Painted frescoes cover buildings that have stood since the 15th and 16th centuries, transforming the town's square into an open-air gallery where history still lives on every wall. Then comes Gruyère, the birthplace of the world-famous cheese. Behind its cobbled streets rises a 13th century castle, while the town itself has preserved its medieval character so completely that walking through it feels like stepping into another century. Switzerland's history continues through the mighty castles of Bellinzona, where 3 fortresses have guarded the Alpine gateway since Roman times. In Merton, medieval walls still surround a town that remembers one of Switzerland's most decisive battles, while each year its light festival fills those ancient streets with modern art without disturbing a single stone. And quietly hidden in the Jura Mountains lies Saint-Ursanne, a peaceful medieval town, built around an abbey so old that its foundations predate most European nations. Time passes more gently here than almost anywhere else. Perhaps that's Switzerland's greatest secret. These towns weren't preserved because they became tourist attractions. They became tourist attractions because Switzerland never stopped caring for them. Switzerland's story doesn't end with castles. It lives on through the towns where history and legend still walk hand in hand. Chur, the country's oldest city, has been continuously inhabited for thousands of years. Its ancient streets carry layers of Roman, medieval, and modern history, reminding visitors that Switzerland's story began long before the nation itself. Farther west, Sion rises beneath 2 medieval castles overlooking vineyards that have produced wine for centuries. For thousands of years, this city stood where trade, faith, and alpine journeys crossed paths. Then comes Bürglen, forever linked to the legend of William Tell, the folk hero whose courage became part of Switzerland's identity. Flower-filled wooden homes stand beneath the same mountains that inspired one of Europe's most enduring stories. Near the Italian border, Soglio was once called the gateway to paradise, a place a great painter believed could never truly be captured in art, only experienced. Nearby, a cliff-top site has welcomed people for over 10,000 years, and a monastery quietly maintained by monks for more than 13 centuries. Switzerland's traditions continue in Romont, famous for its stained glass. In Rapperswil-Jona, the beautiful city of roses, more than 16,000 rose bushes bloom each summer. And finally, Schwyz, the canton that gave the country its very name, the heart of Swiss tradition, the birthplace of the nation's founding charter. Perhaps that is Switzerland's greatest legend. Not one hero, but generations of people who chose to protect what mattered. And now, one final question remains. How did this small mountain nation become one of the world's most admired countries? The answer lies in the Swiss paradox. We began this journey with one simple question. How did a tiny mountain country become one of the world's most admired nations? The answer was never hiding in the mountains alone. It was hiding in the choices people made while living among them. In Zurich, precision built a city trusted worldwide for banking, innovation, and reliability. In Geneva, Swiss neutrality helped make it the home of international diplomacy, where peace organizations found a permanent address. On the peaceful shores of Lausanne, the International Olympic Committee reminds the world that excellence deserves a permanent home. In Basel, centuries of learning, science, and culture grew beside medieval streets. In Lugano, Swiss order meets Mediterranean warmth, proving that tradition and modern life can coexist beautifully. But none of these places became remarkable by accident. For generations, the Swiss believed that every citizen should have a voice. Through direct democracy, people helped shape their country's future. They chose to remain neutral, not because it was easy, but because peace required discipline. They became famous for watchmaking, because precision became a way of life. Their trains arrive on time because reliability has become a national expectation. Their landscapes remain beautiful because protecting nature has become everyone's responsibility. These aren't separate achievements. They're all expressions of the same idea. Do the job well, protect it, pass it on. That's why Switzerland feels different. Not because it has taller mountains, not because it has bluer lakes, but because generation after generation refused to lower their standards. Perhaps that's the real Swiss miracle. A remarkable country isn't built in a single lifetime. It's built by millions of small decisions made with care over hundreds of years. And maybe that's the lesson Switzerland quietly leaves with every visitor. The world's most beautiful places aren't only created by nature, they're protected by people who never stop caring. As the final train disappears into the Alps and evening settles over quiet villages, Switzerland reveals its greatest beauty. Golden chalets, turquoise lakes, misty valleys, and snow-covered peaks slowly fade beneath a sky full of stars. Perhaps Switzerland's greatest treasure isn't its mountains or its famous trains. It's the feeling that life can still be lived with care, patience, and purpose. If this journey inspired you, subscribe and travel with us as we uncover the world's most extraordinary places. And tell us below, which part of Switzerland captured your heart, And where would your own Swiss adventure begin? Farewell, Switzerland.